All right, we'll go ahead and begin the committee meeting. First bill on the agenda is Senate Bill 2844, and I'll recognize Senator Bryan to explain Senator Suber's bill.
I should say, Mr. Chairman, first of all, the bill needs a reverse repealer, and I'll offer that at the appropriate time. The Tennessee Valley Authority sends to the state of Mississippi between $20 and $25 million every year because they don't pay ad valorem taxes. Why it comes to the state when the ad valorem loss is on the local level, I don't know. 90% of that money goes back to the local governments in a bizarre formula, in a bizarre way. This bill captures the remaining 10%, which is $2 to $2.5 million a year, puts it in a fund and authorizes MDA to issue bonds against the fund. The purpose of all this is primarily to help Okolona and Holly Springs, and then also the other electric distributors in the TVA service area. I know that everyone's heard about this a lot, but there is a particular problem in areas near Okolona and near Holly Springs in that there are large areas of rural property, not in those municipalities, that get electricity from the municipal utilities. And in both Holly Springs and Okolona, the reliability of electricity in these rural areas, people who live outside the city limits, who have no control at all over the municipal utility, simply do not have reliable power. In Okolona, in the Okolona area, I have constituents in rural Monroe County who tell me their electricity goes out about once a week and not for just a few minutes either. We just can't have a situation where halfway through the 21st century, there are people that don't have reliable electricity. Through no fault of their own, it's just a quirk of how things develop. At least for Okolona, there is some relief possible. TVA obtained from the Department of Energy grants on behalf of particular utilities. One of those was Okolona. They have in the works, although apparently all these funds have been frozen, $11 million. Okolona would have to match that with 11 million. They don't have the 11 million, but that 22 million would put the Okolona Power Company in a situation where their utilities would be more reliable and they would be able to go forward and get electricity to people. This is really a once in a generation opportunity. So the first thing this would do was help. It would not provide the whole $11 million. It would help Okolona with that match. The next entity that would, in my way of thinking, deserve help would be Holly Springs. I could say all the same things about Holly Springs I said about Okolona, except that right now there's not a TVA grant, and right now the situations are not in Holly Springs where they could do anything with the money if they got it. But if Holly Springs gets to that point at some point, this would be a resource for them. It would also be a resource for other utilities in the district. I know that members of the legislature know about these two situations, want to help. This is a way that can help, and it can help with money that's basically coming from TVA, although it works its way to the state. That's what the bill does. That's why it does it. None of this is going to get resolved at this session, but in order to make clear that help is on its way, and this is a tool which can be used, it would mean a great deal to those of us in this area if this legislation could at least be considered at this session. And I very seriously doubt it gets on the books. I doubt the things with the grant have worked their way out, but this is a first step. And for that reason, I would ask the committee to put a reverse repealer in the bill, and let's send it through the process to give some hope to these people back home.
Okay. You heard an explanation of the bill. Are there any questions on the bill? Seeing none, I'll recognize Senator Bryan for an amendment of reverse.
I would like to
repealer.
offer a good old fashioned reverse repealer.
All right. Any questions on the amendment? Seeing none for motion to adopt the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Any further questions or discussion? Seeing none for a motion.
Title sufficient, do pass committee sub.
Motion is title sufficient to pass committee sub. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. That bill will be reported out. Next is Senate Bill 2968. Senator Rhodes, recognize you to explain the committee sub.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So last summer, or maybe immediately after session, I began getting calls from legislators and landowners and farmers around the state about the sharply increasing rise in property values based on the property valuations on rural structures. Senator Barr hosted a meeting in his area, and I attended that meeting. It was 200 or 300 farmers that showed up down there, and everybody's been very concerned about it. And since then, we've been working on trying to find a solution. And so in Senate Bill 2968, the bill sets rules for how tax values are calculated for rural structures like barns, hay barns, dairy barns, silos, poultry houses, grain bins, pretty much all secondary rural structures as is defined in DOR's manual, but it excludes any dwellings. If a rural structure is, according to the bill, if the rural structure was already in use or in operation before January 1st of 2025, its value would be recalculated using the previous manual. If it's built after January 1st, 2025, its initial value would be based on the latest Department of Revenue guidelines. It also addresses depreciation over time. It says rural structures shall depreciate at a steady rate of 7% per year, but for poultry houses specifically, that they shall never go below the 20%. And there is since 2009, there has been a 45% economic obsolescence adjustment added to poultry houses. This would start January 1st, 2025. Mississippi Farm Bureau, Delta Council, Poultry Association, Cattlemen's Association, and the Loggers Association are all supporting this bill. And that's my explanation of the bill.
All right. Are there any questions on the committee sub? Seeing none for a motion.
Title sufficient, do pass committee sub.
Motion is title sufficient to pass committee sub. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. That bill will be reported out. Next is Senate Bill 3062. Senator Johnson, recognize you to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill is in regards to the broadband tax incentives, and it extends the repeal dates on the broadband tax sections. It also makes a few updates to the code. It was originally done in the early 2000s, so there's been many changes since then. And what this bill would do, in addition to extending those repeal dates, is put minimum standards for what broadband is considered. It puts a cap on the amount of the tax credit that the state offers, and it sets forth a criteria to keep people from double dipping. If they received federal funds, they can't use the federal funds as their tax credit for Mississippi. And then it also puts a 5-year time frame on the installation of this equipment so that we can come back and revisit it and perhaps raise standards again as technology improves. And that's what the bill does.
You heard the explanation of the bill. Are there any questions? Seeing none for a motion.
Title sufficient, do pass.
Motion is title sufficient to pass. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Next is Senate Bill 3126. Senator Delano, recognize you to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, this bill addresses an issue that is specific for our gaming communities in our coast, but it has implications on all of us across the state. When we talk about gaming areas, we talk about that we want to grow our market. We've been very successful over the years in having a robust tourism and destination marketing location for tourists to come. We've also done a lot to attract visitorships from different convention centers. and convention goers, and we've done a really good job. However, we do have a capacity issue, and we do have the ability to handle more people on the coast. But what we have right now is we have a lot of instability within our market, not because of things that are occurring within our local jurisdictions or even within our state, but it's outside competitive pressures that come from Alabama, from Georgia, from South Carolina, Louisiana, you name it. Everyone is increasing the competition. So this bill is set to try to help encourage new capital growth in our casino markets. And what that will do is it'll help us to maintain gaming revenues and increase our tax receipts. This bill is actually a tax credit that allows for an operator that invests in new capital growth within our industry. And new capital growth is defined as amenities that are non-gaming floor related. So to be for hotel rooms, that's really where it's going to be specifically used, but it could be for other entertainment venues as well. But this gaming new growth should be able to receive 50% of the incremental taxes that are generated from this project in a tax credit. So in other words, you take if a casino's been operating for 5 years, you know exactly what their gaming revenues have been. If they come in and make this investment into our state and it's new capital growth, and they end up creating an additional $1 million of gaming revenues, then they're able to take 500,000, half of that incremental growth, and put it towards towards the tax credit. It's limited to the cost of the project. This would be very good for everyone in our state. It will entice new investment and new investment opportunities within our areas and allow us to maintain our gaming revenues. And it should be noted that the casinos have an opportunity to increase revenue by spending more money on marketing and such. That's exactly what we need for them to be able to take advantage of this, but it also helps us in our marketing efforts for the state of Mississippi. Mr. Chairman, that's an explanation of the bill, and I'll yield for any questions.
All right, you've heard explanation of the bill. Are there any questions, Senator Delano? Seeing none, for a motion?
Title sufficient, do pass.
Motion is title sufficient to pass. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Next, our friends from MDA have 2 bills on the agenda. We'll invite them up to discuss those. First will be Senate Bill 3165. And make sure that mic's on and you are recognized to kind of explain the bill.
Thank you. This is the bill that MDA usually requests, the increases to incentive programs. And so it runs by section. I'll be happy to answer any questions on specific programs, but basically this includes a request of $20 million in site development, $10 million in the ACE program, $5 million in development infrastructure, an increase of $20 million to the port and airport loan program. We would also be looking to amend the eligible activities to include rail improvements. This would be to assist with port, airport, and rail infrastructure needs related to economic development projects. Then $5 million through the base enhancement program to support military installations, and then $20 million for industry incentive program. And this would also extend the repealer that's currently on the issuance of bonds.
Okay. You've heard an explanation of the bill. There is a reverse repealer in the bill. Keep it alive for discussion throughout the session. Are there any questions for MDA on these programs? Senator Simmons for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If MDA would be so kind to provide a list of those programs and the respective amounts to the chairman so he can share it with the committee.
Yes, sir. We have a one pager that we'll get to y'all.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You. Any other questions? Seeing none, for a motion?
Title sufficient, do pass.
Motion is title sufficient, do pass. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. We'll skip down to Senate Bill 3169 and Sarah, recognize you to explain the bill.
Thank you. couple of years ago, Inflex was passed and it has become our primary tax incentive. It's been very effective. Companies have really taken to it. It's worked as it was intended. This bill will look at,
Can you repeat that one more time?
it's worked very well. Thank y'all so much for putting that in place. It really has been a successful program. It's very straightforward, user-friendly for businesses that are new to the state and also expanding to use it. We've gotten really good feedback. The intent of this bill would be to start sunsetting some of the programs that Inflex replaced. The calculation for Inflex includes a portion that is tied to the sales tax that would be due on a new or expansion project in the state, and then a portion that's tied to the new payroll in the state. These incentives were previously addressed through the jobs tax credit, which was an income tax credit based on the new payroll, and then a standard sales and use tax exemption that was available to companies. Since these are included in the Inflex calculation, MDA, rather than running into any potential for double dipping, and also just to promote the program and to focus on Inflex, we are recommending starting to sunset or repeal the application or the new approvals of projects under those older traditional programs.
Okay. Thank you very much. Are there any questions concerning the bill? Seeing none for a motion.
Title sufficient to pass.
Motion is title sufficient to pass. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Next is Senate Bill 3166. This bill creates a new multiplier factor for certain renewable energy projects. Currently, there is no category for renewable energy in the industrial multiplier factor pricing table that DOR publishes. This legislation would create a new category, and it's a new industry, and the vendor hadn't created a category when the table was published for Department of Revenue. We're going to create a new category to ensure that these commercial solar and wind assets are being assessed appropriately. And creating this will create a new, more accurate industrial multiplier that would give more flexibility to local governments when they are negotiating fee in lieu agreements if the county chooses to move forward with the project. This basically would create a placeholder factor of 1 until one is created by the service that Department of Revenue uses to deal with this category. This is kind of a new category, and right now they are being kind of under a different category that's really not reflective of the technology or the innovations in technology, which drives the cost down over time. And so that's what this bill will help to do. So that is the explanation of the bill. Be happy to yield for any questions. All right. Senator Bryan for a question.
I'm confused about how these properties are currently assessed and what change this would make in the current assessment.
Well, currently they are being assessed at an electrical power equipment multiplier, and they're not electrical. It's not being depreciated like electrical substations are that are producing electricity. So the cost on wind and solar, obviously solar has become cheaper and cheaper over the years. And so the cost of replacement, those costs are different than the electrical generation facilities that they're currently under the heading of. So this basically creates its own category for solar and wind and will create a multiplier effect for them to assess value on.
Well, if I have a solar facility, are my taxes going to be higher or lower as a result of this legislation?
I think they would be lower, but they'd be in keeping with the actual components of the solar project versus an electrical production facility, which electric generation facility, there are a lot more components. It's priced differently than solar. And I don't think that the cost of generating electricity has decreased the same rate cost of producing solar or wind has. And so I think this is an effort just to create a placeholder while Department of Revenue works. I mean, they've been working on this since last year to come up with something that's more in line with the type of product and industry that they're working with.
Okay.
Thank you. Senator Barrett for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, I don't know if this is a question for you or for DOR, but are you aware or do you know what the average multiplier is? I think this is going to be, I think you said 1 as a placeholder. I'm just curious if, and that may be a better question for DOR, but what other states multipliers are?
I don't know, or I'm not sure if anybody from the Department of Revenue is here
Okay.
to answer that, but I'll try to get an answer to that before.
I can call. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any other questions? Seeing none for a motion. Motion is title sufficient, do pass. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. We'll skip to Senate Bill 3168. This bill is a bill that we had a bill last year we filed on data centers, and obviously that was a lot of moving parts last year, but we're trying to create something that's on par with other states as far as the incentives around data centers. Our Constitution doesn't allow us to go past 10 years. And what this bill does is says that any data center that spends $250 million and hires at least 35 full-time jobs, and also spends over $100 million over a 10-year period is automatically allowed to extend their sales and use tax exemption. This tax credit does not, this tax proposal does not speak to any corporate income tax or any other thing. It just specifically speaks more to sales and use tax. They spend a lot of money maintaining and upgrading their facilities, and other states give 20, 30-year exemptions based on just the base spend and the jobs. We're requiring at least $100 million over a 10-year period in maintenance and upkeep or expansion in order to renew the sales and use tax exemption going forward for another 10 years. That's an explanation of the bill. I'll be happy to yield for any questions. Senator Blunt for a question.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think like all of us, I've been trying to learn about data centers after the historic announcement from last year. And I think I have an understanding, a simplistic understanding of what a data center is. I'm looking at line 50. I don't understand what a virtual currency, cryptocurrency, natively electronic asset, including stable coins and non-fungible tokens, and I don't understand what any of that is. And so I think I understand what a data center is, and I mean, I appreciate where you're going with
Basically,
that.
doesn't apply to those.
It does not.
It just defines what they are and what data center is, and it says that this is for data centers.
Or just,
Yes, not.
okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Senator Fillingham for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious, of the data centers that are in Mississippi already or the ones looking to come, is that sort of a limiting factor in data centers locating here? It's been my understanding that their limiting factor really is the ability to produce enough electricity to feed the centers, and they're essentially begging states, whoever has the capacity, to come and locate here. So is this something that the state would be giving away unnecessarily?
Well, I think that's why we took that, the corporate income tax off the table. I think it's more the sales and use tax going forward. Most states that have these data center incentives in place they don't have the constitutional provision that we have where they can give 30-year exemptions for sales and use tax. We're trying to be somewhat on par with the other states around us that have data center legislation in place that gives that exemption for that runway of 30 years.
But do you find that data centers are not coming to Mississippi or not expanding in Mississippi because we don't offer that? Or is it just the opposite, that they're
think they're-
beating the doors down to try to get here because we have
They're
electricity?
trying to get where they have electricity, but they're also, the sales and use tax is an important component of it. It's one of the more important components of it. It was one of the issues with the ones we passed last year that provided a sales and use tax exemption as long as they maintained a level of maintenance on the property. It was an automatic extension of that sales and use tax. It was a big component of the deal we did last year, and it is an important component of what other states are doing in order to remain somewhat comparable and competitive with the ones. Now, ultimately, the electricity is the big deciding factor. But I think given all things remain the same, other states have these exemptions in place for a fixed period of time, a lot longer than we're allowed to.
Well, I certainly defer to the chair because you got more information on that than probably all of us put together. But I guess my concern is not so much helping Jeff Bezos out because I think he's doing okay, probably on his own. But if that's certainly a limiting factor in making us less competitive, then by all means, we should do what we need to do. But I'm just thinking that probably the limiting factor is electricity. And as long as we have the capacity, they're going to come either way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. Motion is title sufficient and do pass. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. Motion to rise and report. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it.